Good afternoon, boys and girls. I hope you're well today. Today is Thursday. Well done. It's Thursday and it was awful this morning. It was raining and it was cloudy, and luckily the sun has come out. So I hope to go for a walk soon. Are you going for a walk soon? Will you go out on your bike or your scooter? I might go out on my bike in a little while. So today we are going to read Mr. Muddle. And it's a good story. I'll show you what Mr. Muddle looks like. Here he is, Mr. Muddle. And can you believe it? We are on book number 23. And there are 48 altogether. So we're nearly halfway through. Mr. Muddle. Poor Mr. Muddle just couldn't get anything right. Everything he did, everything he tried, everything he said was muddled. Totally, utterly, completely, absolutely muddled. He has his feet on his shoes on his hands. What a silly person. I was a bit muddled up there saying he had his feet on his hands. He has his shoes on his hands, Miss Ryan, you silly Billy. Imagine, for instance, something as simple as hammering a nail into a wall. Now, what could get muddled with hammering a nail into a wall? Mr. Muddle could get muddled, and frequently did. Look at the nail. He has it the wrong way around. The pointy part has to be the bit that goes into the wall first, and you hammer the flat part. Imagine, for instance, something as simple as putting on your coat. Now, what could get muddled with putting on your coat? Well, see for yourself. Only Mr. Muddle will put on his coat like that. Oh, look what he did. He put his coat on backwards. We wouldn't do that. We know exactly how to put our coats on, don't we? We're very good at doing that in early start. Imagine, for instance, something as simple as going for a walk. Now, what could get muddled with going for a walk? Well, when your legs start walking one way and you start walking the other, that's a very muddledy sort of walk. Poor Mr. Muddle, walking one way and going another. Look at the way he's facing, and look at his feet. They're going different directions. Now, you'd probably like to know where Mr. Muddle lives. In a house by the sea near a place called Seatown. Mr. Muddle's house was supposed to be in the country, but Mr. Muddle, who built the house himself, had got the place muddled up. Of course. And can you tell that Mr. Muddle had built the house himself? Can't you? Oh, look. Everything is mixed up. The door is too high. The window is too low. The roof is upside down. This story starts one afternoon when Mr. Muddle was having his breakfast. Yes, we know you don't have breakfast in the afternoon, but you do if you get your meal times muddled up. Mr. Muddle was having bread and sugar and jam and a cup of tea with milk and sugar. That sounds delicious. I would like that for my breakfast, I think. Oh no. Listen to what happens. He spread the butter on the table, and then spread the jam on the plate, and then poured the milk on the bread, and then filled the cup with sugar, and then poured the tea on the bread. What a terrible, muddledy, mixed up breakfast. Oh no, he did it the wrong way. Where is he meant to put the tea? Into a cup. You're right. Well done. I think we need to go to Mr. Muddle's house and sort him out. That afternoon, after breakfast, he went for a walk down the beach near his house in order to work up an appetite for supper. He met an old fisherman called George, whom he knew quite well. "Good afternoon, Mr. Muddle," said George. "Good evening," replied Mr. Muddle. George smiled. "How would you like to come fishing with me?" he asked. "Ooh, no, please," replied Mr. Muddle eagerly. Oh, I think he's meant to say, yes, please, because he's saying it eagerly, not no, please. Help me push the boat out from the beach, called George. Right ho, said Mr. Muddle, and pulled the boat further up onto the beach. Oh, Mr. Muddle, said George, and he had to show Mr. Muddle the difference between pulling and pushing. They want the boat in the water to go fishing, not on the beach. They can't fish on the beach. However, eventually, somehow or other, they managed to get the boat out to sea. Oh, look at them. They're having a lovely time out on the water. That would be great fun. Now let's fish, said George, dropping a fishing line over the side of the boat. Right ho, said Mr. Muddle, and dropped himself over the side of the boat. Splash! Oh, Mr. Muddle, said George again. Oh no, he wasn't meant to go into the water, the silly Billy. It wasn't any good, and they didn't catch any fish, and they decided to go home before dark. Help me pull the boat up onto the beach, called George. Right ho, said Mr. Muddle, and pushed the boat back into the water. George was about to say, oh, Mr. Muddle again, when he had an idea. He smiled to himself. Help me push the boat out to sea, George called. Right-o, said Mr. Muddle, and pulled the boat onto the beach. Well done, Mr. Muddle, said George. Mr. Muddle smiled a smile and went home. George smiled a smile and went to tell everybody. There they are, going home after a lovely day out on the water. The following day in Seatown, Mr. Brick, the builder, asked Mr. Muddle to hold his coat for him. Right-o, said Mr. Muddle, and held his ladder for him, which is what Mr. Brick really wanted. Well done, Mr. Muddle, smiled Mr. Brick, who'd been talking to George. Mr. Muddle was very pleased. There he is, helping him. That's very kind. Then Mrs. Scrub at the laundry asked Mr. Muddle to pass her the soap. Right-o, said Mr. Muddle, and passed her a clothes peg, which is what she really wanted. Well done, Mr. Muddle, smiled Mrs. Scrub, who had also been talking to George. Mr. Muddle was extremely pleased. He's getting everything right because they're saying the wrong thing to him. Then Mr. Black, the coalman, asked Mr. Muddle to lift a sack of coal down from his lorry. Right-o, said Mr. Muddle, and lifted a sack of coal up onto the lorry, which is what Mr. Black had wanted all along. Well done, Mr. Muddle, smiled Mr. Black. George had talked to everybody. Mr. Muddle was delighted. In fact, Mr. Muddle was so delighted, he decided to go home and cook himself a large meal to celebrate. Roast turkey and peas and potatoes and gravy. He put the turkey in the cupboard to cook. He peeled the peas. You don't peel peas, you peel potatoes. He put the potatoes in the refrigerator to boil. You don't put the potatoes in there to boil, you put them in a pot to boil. And then, do you know what he did? He tried to slice the gravy. Oh, Mr. Muddle. That was such a silly story. Now today, our nursery rhyme is Miss Polly had a dolly. So are you ready to say it together? I will count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Miss Polly had a dolly who was sick, sick, sick. So she called for the doctor to come quick, quick, quick. The doctor came with his bag and his hat, and he knocked on the door with a rat-a-tat-tat. He looked at the dolly and he shook his head. and he said Miss Polly put her straight to bed. He wrote on the paper, for a pill, pill, pill. He'll be back in the morning with his bill, bill, bill. Great, boys and girls! Now you better make sure that your dolly at home isn't sick like Polly's dolly. You better make sure she's nice and toasty. Maybe your dolly needs to go for a nap or needs a change of her nappy. You go check, and I will see you tomorrow for another story, another rhyme. Goodbye!